that's probably okay. So welcome everybody. Oops, more people coming in. I'll give it a minute. Welcome everybody. I'm Liza Bernard from the Norwich Bookstore, but obviously hosting this event from home. And yes, indeed, the bookstore is still not yet open for browsing. We're getting much closer. Even though we're not open for browsing, we are more than happy to provide you with books, talk about books, email, phone, through the website. We do curbside pickup, and we also ship anywhere in the country. And we are working on plans to reopen. We have lots of events planned and in the pipeline. I was working on that this afternoon. Some really exciting authors for the next couple of months, and invite you to go to the website to see what's coming. And while you're there, sign up for the newsletter and you won't miss anything. And for tonight's event, we ask you to keep your video and audio, your video off and your audio mute so that it's not distracting. And it's a good idea to turn your computer screen on to speaker view so that the person who's reading is the whole screen. When you have it on gallery view, you'll just see a lot of names and a few little tiny faces. The links to the books will be that are featured this evening will be in the chat bar, and we will be recording this event and posting it to our website in a little while. I wanted to give thanks to Michael Prowse, whose name you'll see on a box, and letting you in and answering questions. He keeps the tech side of these events going smoothly. So the format this evening is pretty straightforward. I'm going to do a brief introduction of both of our guests, and then I'm going to hop off the screen. And then Susan Barber will have the stage, followed by Cleopatra Mathis. And we invite you just to sit back and enjoy an hour of poetry. And then at the end, I'll jump back on and do a little wrap up. So that's the format. So starting with Susan Barber. She was born in New Jersey and earned a BA at Dartmouth and received her doctorate in comparative literature from Harvard University. Her writing has appeared in Poetry, the Yale Review, Words Without Borders, and lots of other places. She is a senior editor for the New York Review of Books and lives in Cambridge, Mass. Her first book, Fair Sun, was awarded the Anahid Literary Prize, and I'm going to get this right, the Minas Kohar Tololian Prize, which is an Armenian prize, and that ties into the fact that her poems have been translated into Armenian, German, and Romanian. She's received fellowships from the MacDowell Colony and Yaddo, and tonight she'll be reading from her second collection, Geode. Geode, if I can get this in the camera, Geode. It's a beautiful little package published by Black Sparrow Press. Naomi Shahib-Nye writes about this book that Geode is rich with shining interiors and tactile relationships, delicate human to delicate earth, small delusions of ownership against wider backdrops of loss and time. Poems acting as guides, I love that phrase, helping us navigate and remember, create an intricate overlay of worlds, humans, and trees. And she'll be followed by Cleopatra, who, though a longtime resident of this region, she maintains deep roots in the southern landscape of her childhood in Louisiana. And I have to say, my heart goes out to everybody in that region who are struggling with the rain inundation and storms that are coming their way. Cleopatra received her BA from Southwest Texas State and her MFA from Columbia University. She's professor emeritus at Dartmouth College, where she began teaching in the early 1980s and founded the Creative Writing Program. Cleopatra has been the recipient of numerous awards, including the National Endowment, numerous fellowships, including the National Endowment for the Arts and the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts. Her work has been recognized by awards, including the Robert Frost Resident Poet Award, 2 Pushcart Prizes, and the May Sarton Award. Her poems have appeared widely in magazines and journals, including The New Yorker, the American Poetry Review, the Georgia Review, as well as in many textbooks and anthologies. Her new book, After the Body, which is, again, it's a beautiful cover, and you can't touch it from on the screen, but they've just done a really nice job of putting these books together. It's her 8th collection. The first aerial view of Louisiana was published 40 years ago. This book received a starred Publishers Weekly review, and to quote Michael Collier, he wrote, "Mathis has surveyed and charted with ever-increasing lyric concision and dramatic intensity the ritual groundwork of human need. The resolute heart and keen human insights found everywhere and After the Body renew the claim many readers of contemporary American poetry have made for decades, that Cleopatra Mathis is one of our most important and essential poets." So, oh, then I also need to, I was going to say this earlier and I forgot, I need to add that both of these books, After the Body, Poems New and Selected, and Geode, have been nominated for this year's New England Book Award, and just being nominated is a real honor. So congratulations to both of you. So without further ado, Susan, Barba, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Liza. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much to the Norwich Bookstore. I'm really excited to be reading with Cleopatra because Cleopatra was the first poet that whom I ever met. She was my creative writing teacher at Dartmouth, and she just, I went into Dartmouth wanting to be a novelist, and I came out as on my way to becoming a poet. So, and that's thanks to Cleopatra. She was not only a wonderful teacher and an incredible role model as a poet, but she was also a mentor. And I'll never forget, she gave me the keys to her office so that I would have a room to work in. And that makes a difference when you're a student and the library's distracting and you're living in a house with other people. And she gave me a room of my own. So I will always be grateful to you for that, Cleopatra. So I am reading from Geode tonight. As Liza told you, Geode came out in April, so in the midst of the lockdown. And it's interesting looking at the book now, there are some echoes of confinement in the book. The book is primarily about the earth and natural history and geology and climate change, but that's juxtaposed against the indoors as well. So I'm going to start with a poem that has a wide view. It's one of the first poems in the book, titled Exhibit 1. Exhibit 1. Start with a base map, unlabeled terrain in shaded green and ochre, nude relief, cool continental mass bathing in blue, a face whose features now are visible, unannotated, apolitical, as if a mighty snow had settled here and muffled every static line and letter. Earth as naked as the moon, but full of lively color from the fissured west into the placid belly of the country. Eastward over Quartzsite Ridge, Carbonate Valley, into southwest trending S-curves up the coast, a range 2,000 miles, 250 million years of mountain, formed in 3 successive waves of rock, uplifted and depressed, and in the west, it's just begun. 6 billion acres under time, under stress, and stretches of content, reserved for a duration, blue-green grid of constant revolution. It struck me today, it was a hazy day here in Cambridge, and that haze came from the fires in the west. And it struck me how small our country is, in fact, to have that haze come this distance. And usually, looking at a map in this sense, it seems small as well, but usually we feel so vast. And the sense of the country is both vast and familiar and near at the same time. It struck me. The first section of the book is a section where all the poems are exhibits. They're numbered exhibits. And so I'll read the next poem, which is titled Exhibit 2. I was thinking of these poems as almost as photographs of the earth. And I wanted the titles to convey a sort of impersonality. They're poems of the earth as opposed to poems of society. Exhibit 2. The centrifugal force of a room, 4 walls, a ceiling. Nothing can get in but what you admit. Part dark harbor, part isolation chamber. A man who'd lived out of doors said what he'd missed most was not a roof, not a lock, but a doorknob. These poems in the exhibits are sometimes set in the north, in New Hampshire and Vermont, and at other times in the Southwest. So there are a lot of poems of the desert in this book too. And this one, Exhibit 4, takes place in the desert. In the Akatia's arms, the red cranes roost. The desert is creosote in a clay pot. The clarity of a single plant, potted in sand, almost as old as dust, mulched with pebbles that remember their late rivers. The plant is seconds old, green stripling in the gnomic earth. All right, I'm going to skip ahead to a long poem titled Ore. That's O-R-E, Ore. Subterranean sounding, rock unsteady, fissuring from roke. Has it begun, the new sedimentary sentence, our influence on rock? Aren't we colonizing time, reducing the stratigraphic record to our hour, minute hands? Can't Earth, the rock of it, remain intractable? In the multi-volume registers of rock, H. sapiens is the latest one-line entry, but the mineral alphabet does not begin with anthropos. It begins with dust, sun, water, mud, bits of fin, claw, mandible, deposits in the bank of time. Darwin compared our knowledge of the structure of the earth with chickens scratching in the corner of a 100-acre field. Levi-Strauss proposed the study of anthropology, our hurry to disintegrate, blithely breaking down all structures. Last century men established methodologies, observing, measuring, surveying, mapping, drilling, magnifying, heating, pressurizing, acidifying, liquefying, refining, defining, monetizing inert matter, turning rock into bread. Rock hounds, lives spent out of doors, deciphering lithos into lingua, created a field, geology, or how to read the rock column of time. In words and rocks, the order is the meaning. Earth, the story they're breaking, legible only if intact, not hoarded, sold to speculators, prospectors, petrochemical lords, nor ignored in the orogenies of daily news, but graven. Here in a field of antiquity, of ore and meteor, rusting outside a rock shop just past Zion. quite a bit of anguish in this book, but for which I feel that I need to apologize. But it's a part of the time in which it was written. Dispersal. Driving the thruway back and forth that time of year, when the twin Samaras spun and sun found harbor in the leaves, she felt the light slip the more she strove. Days ricocheted from loss to loss. She read, tidal stress is to tremor as swarm is to quake. She read, ExxonMobil plans to triple its bet on hottest shale field in the US. She drove and drove. She snapped at the small ones in the back. She bracketed misgiving. She read, strong risk of crisis as early as 2040. She was not speaking to her neighbors who'd raised the forest next door for sport. She'd hoped for equanimity over time, but there was only heat. Regarding space, she wanted nothing more than a margin undisturbed. Regarding time, she wanted never to accept it, the trees succumbing to storms with proper names, the grass succumbing to polypropylene. She planted protests, but they were numbered, and the mayhem was innumerable. She and I and you and they and he, seeds, seeking more than a life in the wind. This is a slightly humorous poem to follow that one. I had been reading E.O. Wilson, and his words on human nature struck me. I'm going to read those words first. The quote is, "The real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology." And I jotted that down, but I don't know which book of his it comes from. So this title is The Pleistocene Today. Making coffee, I'm thinking about the 70s, about Paleolithic emotion and E.O. Wilson, his love for Alabama, Roll Tide Roll. In last night's rebroadcast of The Strongest Man, the contestants were docile as the SoCal sun, like giant purposeful babies in their onesies. Toddling forward, they pulled trolleys filled with squealing children, hoisted cages of women waving, the girl lift, it was called. We couldn't stop watching. The announcer strained to embrace Dawn, the winner, and Dawn hugged Lars, the favored runner-up. How we cheered the golden juggernaut. This is a poem titled Letter from Gaia, and Gaia is the earth in Greek mythology. I am writing this in minuscule from the foot of the old hills while marauders uproot the last impediments to progress. Do they think I am resigned, incapable of anger, that I orbit the sun submissively out of some dark planetary passivity? That my amorality, as they call it, is intrinsic, just my nature? Perhaps. How long I've kept from even lisping it, but simmered, wept, and shuddered. How can I turn my back on my children? They want nothing less than my absolute subjugation. How long it took me to prepare this place for them. They know something of my art, even if they cannot imagine me staring down infinitude, racing to keep the darkness from their lives. What I have made is what I am. Rain, wind, dirt, light, grasses, sedges, clouds, rivers, oceans, glaciers, deserts, waves of sand, waves of water, seabirds, songbirds, birds of prey, volcanoes, fire, flame, sparks, eddies, avalanches, beetles, bees, mice, moths, forests, tundra, mountains, mushrooms, wildflowers. My materials were time and liquid water. They have bagged the leaves, set forests, rivers on fire, broken ground. They have walked hand in hand, slept in each other's arms. They have set down flags to snap in the wind. They have laid grids over the land. They have lit fireworks, dropped bombs and mothers of bombs, painted in caves, laid paving stones, peered through viewfinders, through scopes. They have caught me in the crosshairs. They have seen their own skin, their very lashes reflected back at them, the giants. Their fingerprints are tiny spiral jetties. Their footsteps pass and pass. Their bodies have no armor. The torsos of their young are blameless. I want to remember how it was. Do you remember the trilobites? They were the first here who could see. They once had eyes. They are embalmed in stone. And once upon a time, my children were wild and wise and listened. They have turned the rain to acid. They have named Superfund sites. They have forced their young to drink lead, breathe ash. They have laced the land they grow their rice in with arsenic. They have contaminated the water they catch their fish in with mercury. They have drawn precious metals out of the ground with cyanide. They have sacrificed their sons to the dirt for diamonds, the sea for pearls. They have manufactured poisons, nerve gas, atom bombs, agents of biological warfare. During exercises in which they practice killing each other, their brains have been shaken by the concussive waves of their weapons. They have lost their bearings, and they multiply and multiply. Once they cleaved to me, now they disregard me. They are addicted to ephemera, which profit them nothing. How little they have, how lean their margin. Another element of this book is art and artists. There are a number of land artists who appear in the book and tributes to their work. And this is a poem for a different kind of artist, a friend named Jae Young Yoon. And she creates these incredible ethereal sculptures, and this is a poem about one of them. Dandelion. A patch of dandelions in their seed head prime, each calls out to be picked. A puff of breath or two will launch their wish and ours. But the artist doesn't obey instinct. She plucks a hopeful head and contemplates it. She dismantles hair by hair each radial wicket from its nodule, a pile of fractal fluff, a single naked nub. She glues each white-winged arrow pin to a thread. She sews the whisper of a web and weights it with the found bones of a tiny bird. In place of progeny, in place of wishes, prodigal beauty. I think I have time for maybe one more. Let's see, I'll read two if that's okay. And the first one takes place in New Hampshire. So maybe there are some New Hampshire folks out there as well as Vermonters. The minutes. A silent alarm in summer sounds before dawn. Here we are ticking away, all of us clocks. A thicket of fish upriver under the crystal, the dog nosing along a sack of hours. Trees grow straight from the earth, grandfather clocks the wind tries to topple. A wand of smoke, a trinket curls off a crown, resting on wire. Flame in daylight is dim until the ground catches fire, flares, a race clocked by a bucket. The river in the bucket is not a clock. It is the minutes flowing, the mountains the hours. The earth is its face. Who wound it up and hung it in the stars? The last poem I'll read is titled Practice. Your anger is a scrim, clouding your vision. You see, you hear, and then you testify, you judge. Write the necessary elegies, the songs of temporary fury. Human seasons are as leaves, not oaks. See what forest has arisen from the rot. Allow yourself to be as generous. Oak whose girth exceeds my reach. Forever I am at your feet, looking up. Thank you. Cleopatra, the stage is yours.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here tonight. I don't think I'm supposed to, let's see. I guess if I just start talking, then you can see me, right?
You need to speak up a little bit, Cleopatra.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here tonight. I depend on the Norwich Bookstore for all my book needs, and it's wonderful to be a part of the community of writers who we appreciate so much what Liza and Penny and the Norwich Bookstore have done for us. Can you all hear me pretty well? Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm reading, as you know, from my new book, which is a new and selected. And I have to say, it was really difficult to choose the poems to read tonight. I mean, I didn't want to leave out the older books, but I found myself really trying to step back and see the overlying themes and preoccupations that, you know, pretty much been with me since I was 25 years old and started writing, or started writing seriously. And before I get started, I also want to say I loved Susan's reading. It was so powerful. Susan, thank you so much for those poems. So timely and important. And could not have been easy to write. So thank you. In trying to write to choose some poems from a selected, to put the poems in the book was difficult, but to then go through the book and try to figure out why I'd included certain poems and not included other poems was also difficult. And I did choose some poems to read tonight from previous collections. Some of them are very old and others are not. But I feel like they speak to and cohere in a way with preoccupations I have now as a writer. And so I thought you might see the connection between the old work and the new work. I think if I had to say the poems were about any one thing, I'd have to say the body. But the body in many different aspects. And I think I've chosen just one particular aspect to really concentrate on tonight. So I'm going to start with a poem called The Waiting. Not my climbers, black oak, sour gum, not the silvery underside of the dear mimosa where I spent hours reading, but Louisiana's tree, green through every season. Under the magnolia on my back, knees bent, bare feet flat on the dirt, I gazed at my hands, already my own. In them, a dream of myself, my ongoingness, as if the future were caught in the outspread web of my fingers. Their admirable length, their span, already a piano octave, seemed more than a child's, mattered more than the silly girl in school who questioned my color. When I held up my splayed hand, light shone through the outline, pink skin backlit, just as the light lit each leaf, the precise stems radiating outward from the branches which surrounded the trunk. Exactly spaced, they allowed only pieces of sky, the path of white buds sensibly wound, not yet heady with scent and the demanding heat. The day's fleshy blossoms unfastened cupped petals large as dinner plates, their perfection poised and unassailable. Just to touch them meant a bruise, a yellow-brown shadow on the cream. What I owned was the dim ground, the secret pathways for ants and beetles. The line of roly-polies turned their thin bodies into BBs, metal balls rolling away. Molding the damp earth around my fist, I still made houses for toads, a walled village. Poison was everywhere. Snakes, the oleander lining the house, where black folks left us okra or peas, a bushel of something, at night when no one knew they came. But for the time being, I could still turn away. The tree, another gorgeous southern thing, held me from a longing so fierce I would go numb with it. That world outside would claim me, close the self, lock it tight. And what would it take to open again? For Blue. This is a very early poem. I don't forget. I recognize the bruised persimmon of your lips on others around me. And if I never see again the sweaty ribs when the body bends, there's you picking from can't see to can't see. And your fingers on the nape of my neck when I'm about to wake. So when I call my own girl Blue, it's after you. It's for your one pale eye, shadowed and blind as far back as I go. Lucille, black French of your voodoo mother with airs, that high yellow you cursed is almost my color in your skinny lap. Your hand on my belly to feel the flicker of the tiny tail of another girl you said would grow there. Black butterfly, the shoulders twitching bone. You crouch in the roadside ditch for morning clay, that last remedy to satisfy the ambiguous craving of the poor. What you call the misery in the heart wakes you. I almost always have a fever, and you put the fire in the glass and the glass on my back. You are humming to that purge, and the circle eats the flame. I am tasting your milk again, Annie Blue. I'm tasting your spit and your black neck like a clove in my mouth. And the good days of sweet tea, hot water bread, gold in the pan, the carp and their liquid eyes. The body is another kind of earth. I don't forget what you fed me. Flowers. These blossoms outside the window have nothing to do with the 20th century. Theirs is a foreign story, more foreign than their name from the East, since the East draws closer these days. and their imposing health belongs to a tree that thrives on its own. What does the Chinese plum have to do with history, the great public and private sorrows? The present looms, assuming and yet detached, the stems woven for the purposes of their branches. The tree limits what I can see, pulling me in to regard my ordered room, so I cannot know the Vermont pastures where the vapory rain of isotopes bonds with compounds the grass drinks in and the cows eat. My friend takes iodine on the safe side. What thick, healthy flowers distract me? What beauty bars the window with its exclusive transformation? Not unlike government promises on this morning of my grandmother's 90th birthday. 70 years ago, every member of her family and an entire culture died at the hands of the Turks. Flowers, she says, belong in the grave, where they cover the dead, not the face of what we live. My grandfather lived in this country 50 years without learning the language, yet never went back to Mytilene. He kept himself surrounded by his gardens, his trees, his roses meant nothing to her. To the unborn. Quite simply, I gave you up. I ran and the miles lengthened in my security of breath. My fear less the neighbor's dog than the buckling in my right knee. Who knows where you began? Summer gave itself to the beckoning fall. Apples ripened, though hail left them ruined for market. Later the trees shrugged them down. Windfall and the rich grass, they drew a tinge of yellow and such flavor, we began to prefer the fallen, barely noticing the tiny slug prints and brown scabs of weather. Survival, after all, is not an art, only an indication of how little there is to trust. I read this week how one child spun into the Korean jet's ball of fire somewhere over alien territory and perished of a casual occupant of the wrong plane. Still another, just down the road, fell into one of the orchard hives and died reacting to the common sting of bees. In this way, we all belong purely to the world, because nothing here means safety. It's all territory we trespass, and relentlessly. As that speck of you lived on greed, the determined cells multiplying to complete their plan. It is enough to think of you as I run in the still dark, your kin cold above me. In that heaven, the stars move through their soliloquies and the moon repeats. So much repetition, yet the shrug in any nature, as I, your mother, would not give up my body to the long pull of your survival, its futility and need. I'm thinking that maybe because of time, I'm going to go ahead and read from the new section, since I haven't read from it before, or read much from it, I'll put it that way. The new poems have a lot to do with illness. I seem to have been plagued with a lot of illness in my 60s for the last 10 years or so. And the poems have a great deal to do with Parkinson's, among other things. This time, the hawk. Not safely away, that high up glide admired in day sky. And not even the off-guard thrill of seeing the wild turkey's chick snatched from the row in one easy swoop. This time, straight and sure in the evening gloom, it came at me. The hawk, diving as I've seen in photos, headlong, close up, that curved beak, blunt-headed, wide. I cowered, it swerved upward to a broken off trunk, not 10 feet up. There regarded me. A real hawk, I thought. Nothing imagined for once in these woods. I could see dozens of burrows in that trunk, knotted bowls where years of insects had burrowed, the bark curdling and bulging. I didn't know then how deep it lay in me, the illness calling out, waiting for me in night's domain. Dyskinesia. Dyskinesia is random body movements, uncontrollable, that are a symptom of Parkinson's disease. The wind blew up and over, cold moved in, and that insisting note trained on the lip of a bottle, teasing me with something beautiful. May wind comes blooming, dark side of dove call, spring's warning under the promise of light at 5 a.m. Something beneath birdsong flew the air through the flimsy north-facing windows and found me. First, it was a simple tapping, mysterious argument of my foot against the ancient floor. Then my right side with its jerk, its skinny flim-flam dance, crazy arm obeying whatever spirit had flown. Time now for my body's answer, the body inhabited. How could I not fall? Mother pain. Once in the vast middle of pain, pain stopped, and a certain clarity descended. In the sudden effortlessness of being, I could forget the body. I stayed perfectly still, caught up in wanting it to last, this unexpected innocence born of the body's permission. Minutes passed before I had to move, and pain came riding back, rising and twisting, this time trying to throw me across the room. She was a big wind coming through windows I couldn't close, turning over the orchids I loved, splattering the dirt. If she wanted, I'd be on the floor weeks later, still falling, and she'd bring the walker in to stay, to remind me she owned it all. I was just furniture that needed dumping. I was a dropped clock, and time had turned to serve her. My every second belonged to her. She said, just die. Submission is not such a terrible thing. She knew how to play me out with her pills, her bribes. I give up, I said. And that was how she knew she could release me for those minutes. And I could be my own country, in charge of my little self, the thinking and planning that had once been the sum of me. Later, I could see how this leniency was only to show how easy it was for her to get me back. Mother, I cried, and cursed my infant cries. the news at 2 a.m. It can make you crazy if you listen to your heartbeat long enough. But when I get up in the night, it's not me, not really. Instead, the one who flails and freezes, her body, now some clumsy other. Walking in this dark is all about the wall. Try not to stumble into the painting of the sea you love. Don't hit the dune shack photo you sent flying. Keep your roving hands waist high if you can. Go slow, I tell her. Travel the wall, the comforting law of the wall. Keeping her upright, straight, shuffling my steps like a drunk, feeling my way for what little thing might trip her, trying to make it down the hall with nothing more than bruises. All this trouble with pronouns comes with having been taken over. You, me, and her, divided by news I can't fathom. Arm, etc. Arm has become her own machine, stuck on the job of reaching, all the rules broken in some other language dragged from the depths. The brain's got secrets that even Arm doesn't know. Arm no longer cares for anything hand might do, and hand gets pulled along. Sullen child, poor hand caught in a vise, stiffened by its throb and drum. Arm still insisting, holding hand behind my back, mad tapping to keep from being dragged away. What a story. Me walking with a stick along the beloved beach. An Arm refuses, starts up, directing the waves, flying out in the good beach air as we all try to look away. Can't stop, says hand. Can't balance, leg says. This is how the body wakes me up, and this is how she knocks me down. This sorrow is all about my mother. Did I not believe her stuttered spoon to mouth, soup on the floor, her level black eye entering me? She could slap my face now, hand could, in this boring chorus of saying. But sometimes a hand flies up to pat my shoulder or curls close by my side, pretends to sleep. Sweet pet doesn't want Arm to make me weep. Then when I start to forget, hand runs off, slams the glass, the plate, the sink, and as for the little slave fingers in the grab, they just let go. Mother. When I can't walk, I think of you. I catch your light in my mirror and see it find my shallow cheek, the failing line of jaw. Without walking, I can feel that grimace or wince overtake me, just a second's worth of you and the future of my face. Nothing fails to remind me, a finger on my arm, a twisting in my back when I turn too fast and fall. Tired of my arrogance, you were behind me with time to show me how you felt, to be a shell left empty and waiting. So it is that I steer my body out of the crowded what has been. Because of you, I've come to love a broken thing. And just two more, I think. This poem's called After the Body. What end of waiting, what possibility, when I believe in some transforming spirit. I look to the obvious butterflies, the iridescent glob of eggs the frog left in the brief pool. even the webbing of spider mites and the red pirate bugs that eat them. I assign too much hope to the smallest breakable creatures, crying over the bird that dashed itself into the glass and lies there wasting in old snow. I am in that bird, that dirty clump on the road. And the larval skin of the emerging butterfly, and the larval skin of the emerging dragonfly, all eyes and clutching, split from its own cells and newly winged. How can I protect it? The time it will need hanging there, waiting for its wings to dry. I have been a mask, a ghost, breaking out of myself into all these bodies. And this is the last poem I'll read, and I really want to thank Liza and Susan for this evening. Silver. The design I see is extraordinary. Why watch for hummingbirds when I am caught by the spider web strung in 3 layers outside my kitchen door? Silver linking silver fence, its chain anchoring one end, the roof's overhang studied twice. A geometric pattern, a trick of light this hot morning after a hot night. The net holds a constellation of tiny bugs, inconsequential flights that ended here, a white moth spinning. And as I look closer, 3 long silver hairs, my own, I have to assume, migrated from my deck chair and made pure and purposeful. I'm in a kind of sleep, so think to free the fluttering caught thing. The moth's wing falls off in my hand. Poor thing, I tell myself, wake up. Thank you.
Wow. That was amazing. So thank both of you. The comments are wonderful, powerful, amazing. Thank you, thank you. It must be a little unnerving to read to no audience, but know that everybody is applauding and holding you right now. Oh, oops. So to wrap up, to wrap up, there are links to the books in the chat box, and Cleopatra, living nearby, has offered to sign books if anybody is interested. Just be sure to tell us that you want a signed book when you place your order, either by phone or on the web. And we are in the store Tuesdays through Fridays, and I just want to mention also our next poetry event is Tuesday the 13th, so keep your eye out for that. But I just want to circle back and say one of the words that that just popped up on the screen, and that was exquisite. And I think that was it's really true that your books, your poems offer such personal expressions of wisdom and beauty and thoughtfulness, and we really appreciate it. So thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you, Liza. Thank you, Cleopatra.
Okay, so thank you all for coming, and we hope you'll join us again for another event. And please keep writing, you two. Cleopatra.